since Rahul Gandhi has been saying a lot of things about Savarkar, if he takes a look, a rather close look and not a superficial look at the history of his family, he might find certain interesting things. So a very young Jawaharlal Nehru is studying in London in the first decade of the 20th century, and his father Motilal has told him, don't get involved with these revolutionaries at India House. Okay, you better study. And he sticks to his studies. But obviously he is influenced by various things as a curious young man, and he chances upon this book, which is available in London because it's a free country, but not available in India because we are slaves. So he reads this book and he writes to his father saying that this is a remarkable book and this is the first Indian version of the 1857 revolt. And it is beautifully written, and Savarkar interestingly has used British sources to make the Indian case for freedom. So Nehru is also analyzes the book. He says that, oh, his style of writing is a little flowery, but the content is solid. It just underlines the significance of Savarkar's work in the first phase of his life, when he was looked at as a heroic revolutionary. And if Rahul Gandhi were to indeed start reading some stuff, which is part of his family's archives, he may find such stuff. It's
the most basic of human facilities, denied to not only Savarkar, but there were almost about 100 political prisoners.
And other accounts corroborate this.
Yes, other accounts of Barin Ghosh, Ulaskar Dutt and others from Bengal who were housed there. The basic human facilities, of food, of toilet, of hospital facilities were denied to these people. And it's so sad once again that we as a country don't have all this as part of our history training. The food that used to be served was largely uncooked, or it would have pieces of reptiles and snakes in it, and eating that most of the prisoners would end up with diarrhea. Now the prison rules was that you had only fixed timings to even go to the toilet, and if you are running diarrhea, what do? You need to visit often, and when that was denied, most of the prisoners would actually defecate in their cells, and you had to sit and sleep and eat everything amidst that squalor. You were not even allowed pen and paper, and even Savarkar and others with their nails they would actually write on the walls of the prison cell, and he writes about 6,000 lines of verses of Marathi poetry, Kamala, Saptarshi and several other poems, and just to spite him you had this hell of a jailer called Barry who comes and whitewashes all the walls in front of him. Little did he know that this man had such an elephantine memory that he had committed all these verses and would later come out and actually get that published, and these become important milestones in Marathi literature. Now even if you fell sick, there was no medical treatment allowed, and in that heat of Port Blair, all through the day the most terrible punishment was this kolhu, the oil grinding mill, where usually you have a bullock yoked to it, but the prisoner would be yoked to that, and all day you had to go round and round and extract oil. 30 pounds of oil to be extracted at the end of the day, and that would be measured, and if you are even 1 ounce less than that, you would be whiplashed, you would not be given dinner, you had to wear those gunny sack prison clothes which would lead to skin rashes and bleeding, and that also would not be allowed. And even Savarkar was given solitary confinement for almost 6 months, where his cell actually faced the gallows. So every day all you saw was screaming men who were being taken away to be hanged, and many people either committed suicide or went insane. In fact, there was an entire asylum that was opened up in this place called Haddo Island in Port Blair, just to accommodate all these political prisoners who would lose their sanity. So that was the kind of treatment which went on for many years, and circumventing all of that through hunger strikes, non-cooperation which all these prisoners lead, this man actually ushers in an era of reform in the jail, where a library comes up. There's also a lot of teaching of languages. He says, I'll teach you Marathi and Gujarati, some Bengali would teach Bengali to the others. Everyone is among the prisoners, we start teaching each other's languages, so that creates a sense of national integration and unity. So 11 years that he spends there, I think these are very, very graphically detailed in his own account in his book Maji Janmatep, or My Transportation for Life, and as you said, corroborated by all the other prisoners too who have written there.
And it is the worst kind of humiliation, and Savarkar says that when he does the coir pounding and the standing fetters and crossbar fetters, after that when he lies down on the floor of the cell, he says every pore of the body just hurts. It is unbearable, the pain. So in fact, this is where we need to understand the conditions that prevailed in that jail. When Rahul, again, unfortunately, I have nothing against Rahul Gandhi, but when Rahul Gandhi says that Savarkar was writing mercy petitions to the British when Gandhi and Nehru was sleeping on the dirt floor of an Indian jail. See, we should consider ourselves lucky that Gandhi and Nehru and many others on the Indian mainland did not undergo the kind of torture that Savarkar and many other revolutionaries underwent in cellular jail, because God forbid, you wouldn't even want your enemy to go through all that.
Even the mercy petition,
Mercy
he wasn't the
petitions,
only one.
absolutely.
There's a-
So when it comes to the mercy petitions, now Savarkar's theory is very clear. Let's not die here, because we are in a remote colony somewhere outside the Indian mainland. If we die, people on the mainland won't get to firstly know about our deaths for years on end. So if they get to know about our deaths and the national movement is galvanized, it's a different matter. But that's not going to happen. We'll die futile deaths like mosquitoes. Let's not die here. Let's get out of here, go back and do whatever little work we can. And he tries to persuade other prisoners also to do that. And he himself writes those petitions. And he has written in his book about ferocious arguments he has with other prisoners who are opposed to writing mercy petitions, about how he tried to convince them that let's actually write these petitions, sign them and send them off. Now, as Vikram said, Barindra Kumar Ghosh, Aurobindo Ghosh's brother, also wrote similar petitions to get out of cellular jail. Before Savarkar even went to the Andamans, Satyendranath Bose, one of the Bengal revolutionaries in 1908, when Khudiram Bose and the others were involved in revolutionary acts, when he was set to be hanged, he wrote a mercy petition saying that, please let me out. In the 1920s, well after Savarkar has written his mercy petitions and the Kakori conspiracy unravels, Ram Prasad Bismil, Sachendranath, Sanyal, Ashfaqullah, they are all said to be hanged. They all write mercy petitions to the British. Fortunately, we do not call them traitors, because they are not traitors. Similarly, we may criticize Savarkar over various things. We may agree with him, we may disagree with him. I myself disagree with him on various issues. But to call him a traitor or a coward is unwarranted and absolutely puerile, in fact. It's childish to say
and
these
it's
things.
not even a historical category.
Exactly,
It's
yeah,
a political
yeah,
category.
yeah.
Sorry.
So just to add on to this petition, as Vaibhav eloquently mentioned, it was a very normal route that was available to all prisoners. And in fact, Savarkar being, this young barrister from London, who was well versed in English, he knew the English law. So most of the other prisoners used to call him Bada Babu. He was like their leader. So if you actually look at his 1917 petition, he says something to this effect, not direct quote, but if my name constitutes an obstacle to the release of all the other prisoners, then delete my name and release the others. And that would give me as much pleasure as my own release would do. So clearly he was also being like the spokesperson or the leader for all the others. And when you see British records themselves, there are secret reports that while in prison, both Savarkar and his elder brother are actually also attempting bomb manufacture in Port Blair in the wilderness. And so the British are rattled and they send this man called Reginald Craddock, who comes all the way from Delhi to interview these people. And Reginald Craddock in his official report says, I interviewed Savarkar, and he shows not an ounce of repentance or regret for whatever he has done. So the thing was not a mercy petition, I would call it a petition which was a normal agency that was available to everyone. And the idea is also as a good lawyer to argue the case. Am I a political prisoner or am I a common convict? If I'm a political prisoner, I need certain concessions like remission, like writing letters. You could meet your family only once in 1.5 years. Like Manu mentioned, his sister-in-law dies and you don't even know that she has died. You can't even write letters to your family. So all these concessions which are given to political prisoners across the world, that is something that these people argued for. Now, of course, if he was being hanged, would he have done that? That is a conjecture of history, no one knows. And as you also mentioned, in 1920, when his younger brother approaches Gandhi and says, both my brothers are rotting there for 10 years, please do something. Gandhi himself advises Savarkar to write a petition saying this, now you have the constitutional process, the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, so let them come into the mainstream. And in fact, Gandhi himself files a petition on their behalf. So if petitioning was such a bad word, then, that would not have been the norm. So I think that context is very important. Two things which I think, influenced him to become, to pen this very thin volume called Essentials of Hindutva in 1923 when he was actually in the Ratnagiri prison. One was, of course, the treatment that was meted out to prisoners by the Jamadars in the cellular jail who were largely Muslim. And very easily, it was with that kind of tortures that they were inflicted, to convert them in lieu of lesser punishment was very easy. So they say you just, without conversion, without conviction of faith, just by eating some prohibited food or whatever. So then that was so easy, but then getting back into the fold if they wanted was just not allowed. That was one experience which he writes about, which scarred his influence there. The other more important issue was, I think, the very dangerous program that was going on in India then, which was the Khilafat movement, which Gandhi had launched and yoked it to the non-cooperation movement, where we in India were actually sitting and mobilizing a group on communal basis. And the probably for the first time, if religion entered politics in a very dangerous manner, it was the Khilafat movement, where, and also this, I would say, the seeds of partition were sown during that time, and separatism, where we were actually championing the cause of some caliph who was sitting thousands of kilometers away in Turkey, whereas the people of Turkey themselves did not want this man, and Mustafa Kemal Ataturk took over that. Whereas Gandhi had actually promised the Indian people two things, that in 1 year you're going to get, we're going to establish the caliphate in Turkey, and in 1 year we're also going to give you Swaraj. Now both of these did not happen because the whole program was based on illogic, because we were a slave nation. Now some people raising flags here, people are not going to re-establish. The British who had won that kingdom, that country in war, are not obliged to accede to our request. So that program was doomed for failure. But the communal mobilization that happened led to a series of communal genocides across India, including Malabar, the Mopla revolt, and so on. And for all of that, the Gandhi and the Congress's response was always so pusillanimous. And so there was always a need, there was a need felt for an intellectual counter to that, and that is how this whole Essentials of Hindutva comes about, where always he wrote in Marathi, but this was the first book he wrote in English, presumably for a pan-Indian readership, where the idea, he says right in the preface, that this Hindutva has nothing to do with the theological aspects of Hinduism, the religion, but it is more of a cultural and a nationalistic identity marker. So seen in that context, who is a Hindu in terms of a resident of this nation? He says anybody who is in between this landmass from the Indus to the oceans, who considers this land as the land of their forefathers and also as their holy land, not in terms of religion, but in terms of allegiance, in terms of loyalty, that person is a Hindu. Again, you can be of any religion, so to say, but then this is more of a cultural and an identity marker. So that is how this whole idea of Hindutva comes about in prison and becomes what it becomes later.
We won't push this too much because we've got only about 12 minutes for audience questions.
ഞാൻ മലയാളത്തിൽ ചോദിക്കും, മനു ഒന്ന് ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് കൊടുക്കണം. ആക്ച്വലി ഈ സെഷൻ സവർക്കറെ വെള്ളപൂശാനുള്ള ഒരു സെഷനാണോ അതോ ഞങ്ങൾ ഇതുവരെ അറിഞ്ഞത് തെറ്റായ കഥകളായിരുന്നോ?
ഞാൻ ആദ്യം ഒരു ഉത്തരം പറയാം. അതാണ് ഞാൻ 3 കോണ്ടെക്സ്റ്റിൽ പറഞ്ഞത്. റെവല്യൂഷണറിയുടെ ഫേസിൽ ഒരുപാട് ഡോക്യുമെന്റ്സ് ഉണ്ട്. ഒരു ഹിസ്റ്റോറിയൻ ഒരു മോറൽ ജഡ്ജ്മെന്റ് അല്ല ഇതിനകത്ത് ഇരിക്കുന്നത്. ഹിസ്റ്റോറിയൻ ഫേസിൽ ഡോക്യുമെന്റ്സിന്റെ തെളിവ് എന്താന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ റെവല്യൂഷണറി ഫേസ് 1, പ്രിസന്റെ ഫേസ് അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ പുസ്തകമുണ്ട്, വേറെ കുറെ സോഴ്സസ് ഉണ്ട്, ബ്രിട്ടീഷിലെ ആ പ്രിസൺ റെക്കോർഡ്സ് ഉണ്ട്, അതിന്റെ ബേസിസിലാണ് ജഡ്ജ്മെന്റ് വരുന്നത്. ഹിന്ദുത്വ ഇസ് വേ സാവർക്കർ ബിക്കംസ് കോംപ്ലിക്കേറ്റഡ്. അവിടെയാണ് ഈ താലിയടിക്കലിന്റെ ഒരു പ്രശ്നം വരുന്നത്. ദാറ്റ് ഇസ് ഡെഫിനറ്റ്ലി നമുക്കൊക്കെ അറിയാവുന്ന ഒരു പ്രശ്നം തന്നെയാണ്. പക്ഷെ വെൻ യു ലുക്കിംഗ് അറ്റ് ദ ക്രോണോളജി ഓഫ് എ പേഴ്സൺസ് ലൈഫ്, ആദ്യത്തെ ഫേസിലെ മനുഷ്യനല്ല മാത്രം പിന്നീട് ആ ഒരു ഫിലോസഫി ഉണ്ടാക്കിയത്. Now I translate for you. She was asking whether this session was to whitewash Savarkar or to really discuss his pros and cons or whatever.
I don't think there is a need to whitewash or eulogize. I think, as I said right at the beginning, even if you want to hate someone, please do that after reading about that person. If there is no book that is written about a person for 60 long years in a country where every year there is a book that is written on Gandhi and Nehru, and rightly so, doesn't it amaze you the lack of intellectual freedom or inquisitiveness? We hate an object so much, but then anybody who's associated with that becomes persona non grata. None less than someone like a Hridaynath Mangeshkar, the brother of Lata Mangeshkar, because these people were the ones who resurrected some of the poetry of Savarkar. He was also a great poet. Jayostute, that is that famous song, Sagara Prana Talmadala, all these were put into tune, and actually he was in All India Radio. For doing that, Hridaynath Mangeshkar actually loses his job. So this level of the famous word today in India of intolerance, I think with intolerance, you cannot evaluate any kind of historical figure. So if you really want to hate the person, please do that by all means. But then putting these gatekeepers saying we are not even going to discuss this person because this is an untouchable, I think that is extremely problematic for a thinking society. In the West, people hate Hitler, people hate the Nazi party and what all the Holocaust horrors, but thousands and thousands of books are written about that, so that's how the mind, I think, germinates. Whereas in this country, we are sadly the kind where we make political untouchables of people, and so anybody who evaluates that is also tagged by all these labels, saying, you are either whitewashing or you're eulogizing, with just stating facts. If there are counterfacts to this, kindly produce that, and the answer to a good book should be another better book.
No, I think our idea is to have a conversation on the subject. For 50 years, we just didn't have a conversation on Savarkar. Of course, you can criticize him, you can hate him, and there is no question of whitewashing him for the simple reason he is just too controversial a political figure. He cannot be whitewashed. He was controversial during his lifetime. He has been controversial, in contemporary India, and he will continue to be controversial because of his espousal of Hindutva, because of his arrest in the Gandhi assassination case. So there can be arguments made that, oh, he was the brain behind Gandhi's assassination. There may be arguments that he was not involved there. But our simple argument is, let's have a conversation. And it's a good conversation to have, I think.